more than 430 million cyber attack victims per year. That's about 14 per second. In fact, worldwide research indicates that 70% of the adult population is estimated to have fallen prey to such crimes. From sexual predators, fraudsters, to potential terrorists, the virtual world is an unregulated land of opportunity for criminals. Welcome to On the Front Line, where we're zooming in on cybercrime, one of the biggest growth areas of illegal activity. And while catching criminals in the virtual world is a real headache for authorities, as Michel Santos found out, committing such crimes is often as easy as finding the motivation to do so.
5 times more internet users in just 1 decade. Internet use has grown exponentially, and as society has become more dependent on the World Wide Web, cyber criminal activity has boomed. There are several motives for online attacks: theft, fraud, political activism, industrial war, or even military objectives. The victim is usually unaware of the attack. We come to the south of Lisbon to meet an internet activist. Rui Cruz prefers not to show his face. He's the founder of a site inspired by WikiLeaks.
In 2010, I created Tuga Leaks, as the oppression of WikiLeaks was at its peak, to denounce corruption and give information that traditional media didn't want to publish in Portugal. 1 month ago, I had a problem with the authorities. I'm facing charges, which I still don't know that much about.
Without committing a crime using tools easily available to everyone on the internet, Rui showed us how activist hackers carry out an online attack.
To bring the sites down, the attacks are made by a group of hackers and also a network of compromised computers to send more packets of data than the server can respond to. The biggest record was with 12,000 users in a response to the closure of megaupload.com. I believe they had some protection and also used botnets.
What makes cybercrime all the more difficult to prevent is that it operates in a borderless virtual world, and that many countries have no legislation recognizing online crime.
I'm joined on the front line by Jamie Shea from NATO's Division of Emerging Security Challenges, and Eugene Kaspersky, who's flown in especially from Moscow to be with us, and who's CEO and chairman of the internet security giant Kaspersky Lab. Many thanks for joining us.
Good to be here, Isabel. A pleasure.
Now, there are virtually no cross-border agreements, so little recourse to legal action. I'd say outdated law enforcement. I imagine funding's an issue. So cyber criminals have basically had carte blanche to do as they please. How have we been caught so unawares?
Well, I think it was because the internet, Isabel, in the first place, was designed to be a free and open space. Nobody thought about security when it first came along, and so to some degree the security world has to play catch-up. But I think it is playing catch-up. This is not simply a problem of the hacker in the garage and somebody losing their credit card details, as bad as that is, but it's really a strategic-level problem. For example, we calculate that last year cyber criminals managed to take $1 trillion out of the global economy. That puts cyber crime at the level of the international drugs trade.
There are 3 main forms of online illegal activity. There's virus and malware. Basically, that's when your computer can be kind of crashed into and corrupted and information stolen, account details taken, and that accounts for more than 50%. Then there's what's known as phishing and smishing, and that's when credit card details, passwords and usernames are stolen via computers and mobile phones. And 20%, that's about 20%, and then other scams account for a bit more than 10%. My question to you, Mr. Kaspersky, is we know who the victims are, But who are these invisible criminals?
They're different groups. They're individuals. Sometimes they are groups of people, and well, actually they organized, but they organize it not like mafia. So it's like businesses. They're independent. Maybe they don't know each other. They know only nicknames to connect each other in the internet. So that's the criminals. But another group is so-called hacktivists, which they're just protesting. They run distributed attacks. They steal information and publish this information simply because they don't like someone or some organization. So it's a second source of all these attacks. And now we are facing the third source of attacks, states or maybe cyber terrorists, which is, unfortunately, it's a very big, and maybe that's the most important problem in the digital world at the moment.
The European Union is going to be opening up a cybercrime centre in The Hague next year, and there'll be legislation coming in with that. But without a global agreement, don't these centres kind of lack the teeth to be able to get to these criminals?
Well, I agree with you as well that it's going to be a while before we have a global agreement, because we still don't have common definitions of what is a cybercrime. Something that in one country can get you a life sentence can be considered in another country as a form of sort of social misbehaviour, where you get sort of a 6-month restraint order or something. So we badly need internationally to reach the same sort of definitions. When is a cyber attack the equivalent of a military attack? What's the difference between defence in cyberspace and offence? What are the definitions of crimes? But it's clear, one single principle: what is not permissible in the real world, whether it's theft, violence, should not become permissible because it takes place in the virtual world. We need to put the same standards into cyberspace.
Just before we move on to the terrorism issue, Mr. Kaspersky, this is a contentious issue, I guess, the business you're in, because people will say, well, while these criminals are raking in billions of euros, software giants like yourselves are also making a lot of money and possibly feeding the fear about the cyber world. What do you say to that?
I think you miss the prediction and scare, because, well, in most of cases we predict we predict very bad things, but they become true. And actually, we were speaking about internet wars before it happened. We were talking about the global internet attacks before it happened. I started to talk about cybercrime on the very 10, 12 years ago, and we got the idea of cyber weapons and critical cyber attacks also before it happened. But actually, the security experts, not all the time they just want to scare people. It's not the business of scare.
Well, then let's watch this video then. It's probably the right moment to watch the video.
Cyber terrorism, fact or fiction? There's growing global concern that critical infrastructures could be targeted by cyber terrorists, potentially crippling transport systems, hospitals, water supplies, or even nuclear power stations. They could be hacked into if they're online, or if someone on site infects their computer systems, and with possible disastrous effects.
A priori, aujourd'hui, toutes les infrastructures sensibles, que ce soit autour de
Theoretically, today all sensitive infrastructures are vulnerable. I'm talking about infrastructures around water, energy, transportation, rail or aviation, that use tools unfortunately connected, if I can say it like that, to the internet. And why are they vulnerable? First, because there are potential targets. Secondly, due to the fact that security levels against an attack from the outside are not strong enough.
Jamie Shea, is this reality or paranoia?
Well, I don't think we should overhype it, certainly not. For example, I personally don't believe at the moment that a war can be won or lost totally in cyberspace, although I think the cyber dimension will become an increasingly important part of conflict in the future. Now, what that gentleman is talking about is the threat to critical infrastructure. But threats to critical infrastructure can come from storms, freak weather conditions, flooding, earthquakes. Look at the Fukushima nuclear power plant in Japan last year, as much as from cyber attacks. And we need to have, therefore, certain standards of protection of our critical infrastructure, both against cyber attacks and these kind of freak conditions.
Yeah, is this getting the attention it deserves?
100% agree with you. So this is the cyber weapons, cyber attacks, they have to be managed in the same way as biological or chemical weapons or nuclear weapons, because at the moment there is no protection against cyber weapons. You are talking about the standards and international regulation for that. It will take how many years?
Okay, well, Stuxnet then. That passed a new threshold, I think, in terms of the potential of the cyber world, of what it can do. As you know, but for our viewers, the allegedly partially disabled Iranian nuclear facility. Is that the future, then, of modern warfare?
I think that was a very good example of their first cyber attack, and that was example of that's reality. It can happen. That was just a proof that cyber weapon is reality. Stuxnet, I think it's a third example. Second was attack on Estonia. The whole country was shut down. And I think the first very good example, that was a blackout in east coast of United States in 2003, which was most probably was caused by a virus epidemic. So there are examples of how dangerous the cyberspace is and how easy it can be damaged. And unfortunately, again, there is no protection at the moment.
Personally, don't believe that wars will be won or lost in cyberspace. I think cyber will be a factor, particularly at the early stages, in trying to attack people's command and control systems and gain an initial advantage. A little bit like shelling on the Western Front in World War I, where you try to soften up an opponent initially. But it's just like everything else. It has its dark side, and we need to exploit the good side, and we need to better manage the dark side.
Many thanks. And by the way, did you know that while this programme has been on air, and if estimations are correct, about 10,000 people have been made victims of cybercrime? Our next edition of the programme will be looking at the disturbing issue of human trafficking. We hope you can join us.